Hello and welcome everyone. Thank you for joining us today as we continue our 2020 webinar series, S/4HANA versus ECC, Understanding Your Options as a Supply Chain and an Operations User, Manager, and Leader. This series takes a deep dive into what is different between S4 and ECC. If you missed the previous webinars, they're all available on demand on our Reveal website. Today, we're going to discuss what is different in S/4HANA versus ECC in the areas of production and capacity planning. Today's presentation will last approximately 30 minutes, followed by time to ask questions. Please feel free to capture your questions in the question or chat section during the webinar. At this time, I'd like to introduce you to today's speaker, Sean Stokey. Sean is an SAP Plan to Make Integration Advisor at Reveal with over 20 plus years experience in supply chain management. Sean has a deep passion for SAP-centric supply chain transformations and is responsible for educating on and ensuring clients are utilizing SAP best practices to support planning integration across the supply chain. So let's please welcome Sean Stokey. Over to you, Sean.
Howdy, everybody. All right, we have about 30 minutes and quite a few topics to get through. We're going to speak first about some of the 3 key changes that are coming in S/4HANA. Then we're going to talk about what's actually staying the same. So what are we still able to do in S/4HANA that we're doing in ECC, essentially? There's quite a few things that will stay the same for us. And then we're going to talk about the wonderful world of Fiori and what's available to us in that workspace, and then we'll wrap it up. So what's staying the same? I'm sorry, what are some of the 3 key changes? Excuse me. One of those 3 key changes is that production versions, if you're not using them now, are now going to be mandatory within S/4HANA. So production versions are one of those very, very essential master data elements, although not mandatory in ECC, that allow us to do a lot of things with finite scheduling, choosing source of supply, choosing the resources or work centers of which we're going to be dispatching our operations to and our orders to. Although they are not mandatory now, again in S/4HANA, because they are a key element to determine source of supply, they're mandatory going forward. So if you haven't really went through the effort to create them now, and of course they tie together the bombs and the routings, it would be a really good idea to probably start that effort now before migrating over. If you do it now, get your data cleansed, and then go to S/4HANA, it'll be much easier to migrate that data over than going into S/4HANA and creating it then. So that's one of the key differences. The other one is that our graphical planning board is no longer part of the target architecture. So, sorry. I'll speak to this in a moment. There are some things that we can still do. So if you're using CM21 or CM25 today, we'll talk about what we can do and what SAP S/4HANA will offer tomorrow. So even though it's not part of the target architecture, it actually still exists within the GUI side of S/4HANA. But there are some caveats to that we need to speak through if you're going to be using it. The other 3 key changes is that APO, if you take PPDS out of it, is now fully embedded within S/4HANA as a very simplified but very powerful tool for advanced planning. So APO, as we slowly migrate away from that and bring IBP into the picture, they've essentially taken a slice out of APO and PPDS and literally embedded it into S/4HANA. I'll speak to that in a moment as well. So in regards to production versions, again, they're a necessary manufacturing master data element. It allows for alternate bombs and routings, essentially that different source of supply. If we want to have an MRP plan across multiple production lines or a dispatch and graphical planning board to multiple production lines, so you have 2 different work centers and you want to dispatch from one to the other, there's different costings, different rates. This is actually mandatory even in ECC if you want to adopt those different rates and costing elements there, the activity types. If you're not, even if you don't really have a requirement for that today, tomorrow in S4HANA, even if you have a simplified approach, even if you have just one BOM and one routing, you still need to maintain that production version. A little bit unfortunate if you have a simplified approach to your manufacturing master data. But if you do have multiple routings and BOMs, multiple production paths, different production lines and so forth, and you're not using production versions now, again, I would go ahead and start going through the exercise of getting those maintained, because they will be mandatory going forward. This is just a depiction or a picture of ECC versus S4HANA in MRP4, where you can actually select the BOM explosion requirements. Here, you can select by production versions or only by production versions in ECC. In S4HANA, you can see that field doesn't even exist. So again, they moved completely away from giving you the option to now you really have to. This is typically a relatively big lift for a lot of companies who haven't already started using production versions. So if you plan to migrate, well, we know we all have to migrate at some point, but if you plan to do it sooner than later, highly recommend starting this exercise as soon as you can. Go ahead and start maintaining those production versions and getting used to going through the validity checks and so forth. You'll save yourself a lot of time than having to do it when you do a greenfield or something. So you can actually migrate that data over. All right, the graphical planning board. If you haven't used this, if you don't do finite scheduling today, if you're not adhering to some of the best practices with SAP, capacity planning in SAP is a two-part process. One is capacity evaluation. It's our CM01 through CM05, and I'll show you that in a moment if you haven't seen that. The other part of that is our capacity leveling, essentially taking the capacity constraints, taking our orders, and literally dispatching them to the work centers or resources that are going to be doing their work. So essentially, this is where we level our capacity. So future graphical planning board will still support drag and drop functionality. Remember, going back all the way to 1509, I believe, in every simplification document that's come out to date, SAP has been telling us that this graphical planning board that we're used to using is no longer part of the target architecture. What they have said, however, is that there will still be functionality like we see today, where we can take, if you're used to using it now and you drag and drop your orders from the order pool up above, your order pool down here to the actual work centers, we'll still have that functionality. We'll just have a much limited version of what we have today. So what that means is, if you're used to, and even we do this to several of our clients, we get into the habit, and not necessarily a bad thing, of highly customizing the graphical planning board. We can go in there, change colors, add fields, take away fields, add descriptions, do some really neat things with the graphical planning board to make it more applicable to the planners that are using it. What they're saying is tomorrow, that customization, if you highly customize it, won't be able to migrate over to whatever future option they're going to have. Now, again, they haven't said what that future option is, and I'll show you in a moment when we talk about what's staying the same. Even though this is no longer part of the target architecture, this view is actually part of the GUI part of S4HANA. So the key point here is, if you haven't used it, or if you are using it and you're customizing it, I probably wouldn't customize it any further than what you have today. And the point there is, we're giving these planners this nice, really shiny tool they're going to be used to having and used to using. And yeah, they may get to use it for a little bit once they convert over to S4HANA, but sooner or later, they're not going to get some of that same functionality, that same look and feel that they're used to using. And by the way, a lot of this stuff is being replaced by Fiori anyways, and I'll talk about that. But another key point, when we talk about embedded PPDS, so PPDS embedded in S4HANA came about in roughly 2016 in version 16.10, right? So again, the whole point here is that with the onset of IBP, which is mainly used for medium and long-term planning, they've essentially went away and migrating away from APO. to IBP for that medium and long-term planning, and that short-term planning, which was PPDS and APO, has now been sliced out of that and brought into natively into S4HANA. So it's really meant to work with that MRP Live, the database support that's there with S4HANA that's so much faster, is much more capable of doing some of these things that APO was doing, but within S4HANA. So literally embedded into S4HANA. So there's no need to have a separate instance running APO and your SAP over here. And I'll talk through some of those key differences here in a second. So if you're used to using APO today, only production data structures are supported. So if you're migrating over from APO to embedded PPDS, PDSs are supported. If you're using the old PPMs, those are no longer supported, so you would need to migrate over or do a little finagling to get it to work within embedded PPDS. However, work centers and routings are all now maintained within S4HANA. You just got to mark them for advanced planning. So we don't have to maintain two different data sets. We don't need to maintain the work center capacities, routings, rates, and so forth in S4HANA or ECC, and then also in APO. These two are now tied together and live and breathe within one system within S4. So that's a really great time saving right there. A lot of clients where they're using APO or even IBP in some cases where they try to maintain some of this data up there. Now we can just maintain it in S4HANA and it carries over to all other aspects. The integration is there natively within S4HANA. Another key difference between APO and embedded PPDS, materials are planned and scheduled within PPDS. So literally within S4HANA, there's no need to go out to another system and plan and schedule these and go back and forth and tile the links and hopefully everything works fine. Now materials are literally planned and scheduled within PPDS. So another big time saving and simplification there. Planning areas do not exist in S4HANA PPDS. So capacity reservations, PPDS deployment, and time-dependent safety stock, unfortunately, is not supported. However, you'll see in S4HANA, there's a lot more functionality that you get in terms of safety stocks, dynamic safety stocks, and so forth. So though it may not be, may not live within PPDS, there's probably some other functionality that just lives within S4HANA that's replacing some of this. So I wouldn't worry too much about that yet. No global ATP are capable to promise or even capable to match in embedded PPDS. Again, most of these things are replaced with some other functionality, advanced ATP, and some other things within S4HANA. So some of those nice tools that you have within APO, within PPDS, in that landscape, aren't going to exist in embedded PPDS, but again, are usually replaced by some other Fiori apps or tiles or functionality that gives you that same thing, same type of functionality. So those are some of the key three differences between ECC and S4HANA. So let me speak briefly. Sorry, there's one last point there. Embedded PPDS cannot create planned orders. It only schedules it. So in APO, when you're creating those planned orders, bring them over here, MRP Live, and MRP is creating those planned orders, and then we go in there and we schedule them with embedded PPDS. Sorry for missing that one last point. All right, so those are the three key things that are essentially changing. So what's staying the same, right? What can we carry over from ECC to S4HANA? And there's actually quite a few things that we can carry over. When we talk about capacity planning, again, capacity planning is really a two-step process, capacity evaluation and capacity leveling. And capacity evaluation, our lovely CM01 through CM05 transactions still exist. So things like hierarchies and accumulations and long-term views and changing from weekly buckets to daily buckets and detailed scheduling. I'll show you some screenshots of that in a moment. All that still exists. That's all still there within the GUI side of S4HANA. So all those transactions that we're used to doing to assess our capacity requirements versus our available capacity are still there within S4HANA. So that's not going away. I'll talk about the Fiori side of that again towards the tail end of this. For capacity leveling, our beloved graphical planning board still remains, but for now, right? So we still got to take into consideration the amount of customization that we do, but it's still there. Although it's not part of the target architecture, they do state that eventually they'll replace it with something that still has that drag and drop functionality, just a bit simpler in terms of the customization that you can actually do for it. So everything when we go to S4HANA, they're trying to simplify some of these tools that we're used to using, and probably for good reason, right? As much as I love to go in there and customize the graphical planning board for our clients, again, there's no point in doing it now and hand over this nice shiny tool if they're not going to be able to use it tomorrow. Whatever tomorrow means to you, you can really assess whether or not you want to go and customize any further. If you haven't seen these tools, I'll show them to you briefly, but the lead time and schedule adherence reporting, some of the LIS reports that exist within ECC still exist within S4 with S4HANA. So the material header and operational analytics, all those reports are still there within S4HANA. So that's good news. But I'll show you one of the caveats that I was hoping would be fixed with S4HANA. I was actually talking to a client today about it, and unfortunately, when we get to that side, still one of the main hindrances that I see is still there in S4HANA. Hopefully it'll be resolved at some point. So our standard overview, when we get into, this is our capacity evaluation. If you haven't seen this today, this is CM01. This is where we take our available capacity and our requirements, and we get essentially our capacity load. Are we overutilized or are we underutilized? So if you're not using this today with an ECC, I highly recommend starting to use these transactions. Of course, it may take some master data maintenance. If you haven't gone in there and maintained your work centers and your routings, you haven't maintained your capacities within the work centers, the rates and your standard value keys and so forth, highly recommend starting that exercise now, because again, all this stuff is applicable not only in ECC, but in S4HANA. So if you haven't maintained it now, you're going to have to maintain it tomorrow. You might as well do it now and be able to migrate your data over tomorrow. Make use of these tools today because they're there. Might as well use them. And it is a key tool for our capacity planning process. So the standard overview is still there. Our detailed view, which is a really nice view if you want to have a dynamic production schedule, if you want to go in there and do confirmations, all that functionality that exists within ECC today still exists within S4HANA tomorrow within the GUI side of the world. The lead time view, the accumulation, if you wanted to take your capacity requirements and actually accumulate them over time, you can use this as a lead time report and see when we would actually go under 100%. So essentially, what does our backlog look like? When can we actually take orders if we're overloaded? That functionality still remains within S4HANA as well. So this is all really good news for anybody who's a production planner, a global supply planner, supply planning, network supply planning, so forth and so on. All these tools, or plant managers, operations, so forth and so on. Everybody can still utilize these tools within S4HANA. Again, graphical planning board is still applicable to S4HANA. As much as they say it's not part of the target architecture, it is still living and breathing, living happily within the world of S4HANA. Again, just be a little cognizant that it's not part of the target architecture. Eventually it will be replaced, so just be a little bit careful about the amount of customization you do. When we talk about the analytics, there's really two sides of it. It's the production order, the schedule attainment side of it, and then the operation work center side. All of these reports where we assess target lead times, target versus actual quantities, deliveries, lead times. Maybe you've seen these reports, maybe you haven't. Typically when we go into clients, this is one of those things where we didn't really know existed, so we brought on a MES system that does all these analytics for us. But guess what? These tools are actually available in ECC and S4HANA. So if you haven't used them today, again, go in there, dig around, start using them, and then you'll be able to carry that information over to S4HANA as well. So this is the production order side of it. The operational side, you go into deeper into the work centers, you can go into the orders, the operations, data confirmations, and get a slew of analytics that really lead to manufacturing deficiencies or master data issues, do lead time variations, target execution time, actual execution time, queue time, so forth and so on. The one thing, however, that I was hoping would be resolved with an S4HANA, and really the biggest pain point for me when I go to clients and speak to them about the utilization of this report, is that unfortunately, when we talk about the days, for whatever reason, if you have orders that only go up to a day, SAP rounds to a day. They do not consider the hours for whatever reason. And unfortunately, in S4HANA, even on the latest version, they still don't consider hours. So where you're less than 1 day, it's going to round up to a day. There's still a lot of value in these reports, even though that is the case. Hopefully, eventually, somebody that is doing a lot of analytics with SAP catches tune to this and resolves this at some point. But for now, it's still a pretty big gap, in my opinion, in terms of being able to utilize some of these key characteristics that are available in these reports. But again, the reports are still available. The transactions are still the same, both in ECC and S4. All right, so let's welcome to the wonderful world of Fiori, right? So even when you go into S4HANA and you go through their database and you search for SAP best practices, where before in ECC, when you would do, and even if you look for best practices and the workflows and the process flows, in ECC, they point to CM01, CM25, the graphical planning board, capacity evaluation. Now, when you look at these workflows, they're really pointing to the Fiori apps. So the apps that are intended to replace the GUI transactions. So you can easily tell that SAP is moving more and more and more in the direction of Fiori. This is extremely evident when you're working with in the cloud. In the cloud is nothing but Fiori. You don't even get those GUI transactions. Everything that you do in the cloud is literally built solely on Fiori. So you can tell this is the future of SAP. So even though those transactions that we have that we're used to using, they're there in S4HANA, the complete capacity planning suites and the analytics that we get with it, they're there within S4HANA, but we're really migrating away from that to all of these tiles. The tiles are really wonderful in a way that you can really create your own tiles and build your own workbench. All right, so whatever transactions, when you set up your favorites in GUI, you can start setting up your dashboard, your Fiori tiles in a way where the apps that you typically use are the apps that you're going to see in your dashboards. You come in the morning and you just start working on the tiles that are applicable to you. Of course, you need to be cognizant of being exception-minded, so still working heavily within MRP, but we get a lot of functionality within the production side of the world that replaces some of those CM01, CM25s, and some of those list reports that were typical, that we're used to using within ECC. So some of those I'll speak through in the next 3 slides. So again, capacity evaluation, where I showed you before what we have in terms of the GUI. This is really being replaced with our Managed Work Center Capacity app. So you get a lot of the same functionality. You can see your work centers, you can see your cumulative load. In ECC or in S4HANA, you have to go in there, go into general settings and accumulate requirements. Here it actually shows you that by default. It'll even show you the first week that you're actually overloaded, where if you're going through your typical format, you're 9 weeks in CM01, or you have to go into your overload report to see where those overloads are. You get all that information within one app. You can see what's overdue, how many hours are overdue, and what our total requirements are. You can even see the days in which we have available capacity. And this is your weekend right here. So right now we're working on a 5-day work week, and these are the days that have no capacity. So you get a lot more functionality within the Fiori app. It's really combining a lot of those different CM01 through CM05, pretty much taking all that and combining it into one workspace essentially. So they put a lot of thought and effort into making this a bit more easy on the user experience. So really focusing on that user experience instead of having 10 different transactions. They're pretty much just to be all combined in one. On the right-hand side, it's essentially just taking that same thing, flipping it, and this would be essentially that CM01 week over week. You can see now our utilization week over week as well. So you get a lot of that summary information here, but if you want to see a view that's similar to what we see in ECC or an S4HANA GUI, we can still see that as well. But everything is more graphical, everything is more pleasing to the eye, is aesthetically pleasing, if you will. Very nice to print them out, put them on the shop floor if you need, versus those CM01, CM25 views. Excuse me. Capacity leveling, there is a tool available to do that within Fiori. It doesn't have a lot of the same functionality yet. So dragging and dropping and so forth is not really a thing unless you go to embedded PPDS, and embedded PPDS allows you to go in there and start doing some of the same things that you would do in a graphical planning board. So by default, unless you toggle on advanced planning and embedded PPDS, you're a bit limited in terms of the utilization of the capacity leveling app that's available in Fiori. So you might still want to use the GUI if you're used to using it, the GUI CM25 transaction or CM21, whatever transaction you're used to using, unless you want to move over to embedded PPDS, and then you get a lot of the functionality and then even more on top of that, heuristics and so forth. All right, so when we talk about scheduling and shop floor execution, if we're going in there and we're managing by exception, and I really hope we all are, we're using our MD06 or MD07. By the way, MD06 goes away. There's no more list views. But if we're using MD07 and MD04 and S4HANA, we're going in there and we're searching for some of our master data inconsistencies, some of those master data related exceptions. We actually have an app that will point us directly to those as well. So in all of our orders and our operations, it'll tell us right off the bat in a summary view of all those orders where we may have issues. Maybe the production version isn't maintained, maybe the validity dates are out of, or maybe we're out of those validity dates, either in the production version, the BOM, or the routing. It'll point us directly to that. So we should still be doing our exception monitoring, but we also get these tools that'll point us straight to it. So if we're focusing on our 30s and our 10s and our 8s, and we're not really getting to our 64s and 62s and so forth, we have an app that'll point us straight to those. Material coverage is live and breathing well within Fiori as well. So on all of our materials, where we're doing production planning against, where they're internally procured, we can see where we may have our first shortage. If it's externally procured, we can see that as well. So this will give us a really good overview of where we may have shortages, and you can see that and apply it to our production orders as well. Speaking of, where within ECC and S4HANA GUI, you need to go into the order to really see the health of it. You have to go in there, take a look at the confirmations. When was the last time somebody confirmed? Which one of those operations is fully confirmed, fully delivered? We have to do a little bit of digging to get to that data. Guess what? There's an app that's going to point us directly to where we are, whether or not it was released on time, started on time, finished on time, and goods receipts done. And if we have issues along that path, it'll give us a heads up, right? So yellow, red, green, just like our stoplights, our status if you will, it'll give us a cue as to how we're progressing in that order live and in real time. So it'll give you a good visual of how we're performing, and it'll give you a cue as to whether or not we're going to be late based on maybe where we stand in the current operation. So this is a really big bonus above and beyond what we currently get in ECC. Granted, we have some reports, and maybe you develop some BI reports that do this for you, but now we can go in there to Fiori directly and drive right into the health of these orders. We even get that and our operation status as well. So in our top level, our order, our header analytics, if you will, we can dive into the operations, all the operations that may be on a specific work center or a grouping of work centers. And we can see again, where are we, right? So kind of what you can see in CUIS, but again, it goes above and beyond that. Where CUIS, you have to visibly see if we're going to be late or on time. Again, we get health metrics literally embedded into these apps. So a really big bonus above what we get live currently while we're working in those orders versus going into CUIS and having to derive the data or derive those metrics out of the report, or even after the fact. As much as I love my header and operational analytics, again, that's after the fact. That's usually after the confirmations are done. So we can derive our bottlenecks and derive our inefficiencies out of those reports after the fact, and that's an ECC and S4HANA GUI. Now the point is, let's be proactive on that. So in addition to our exception monitoring, where we can see where we have an imbalance in supply and demand, we can go one step further and assess the health of our orders as well. So I think this is a really big bonus for everybody that's going to be moving over to S4HANA, especially if you're willing to make the leap into the world of Fiori. So let's wrap this up. So if you wish, most things are essentially staying the same, right? We get a lot of the same tools that we use in ECC today. The same transactions exist in S4HANA and GUI, but why not take that plunge? If you're going to go into the wonderful world of S4HANA, much faster, much more lively, let's go ahead and take that plunge into Fiori. You can see some of those were just a few of the key apps. There's a slew of apps that are available to us, way above and beyond what I'm available to show just in the 30 minutes that I have allotted for me. So all manufacturing master data that's maintained in ECC, if you went in there and you've maintained it accurately and you feel comfortable with it, the information's accurate, or rate routings are correct, or the rates within the routings are correct, or our production versions are there, our work centers and importantly our capacities are correct, you can maintain all that or migrate all that over to S4. But just keep a note that, again, production versions are now mandatory in S4. So it'd be really good exercise to go in there and start maintaining that today. Our standard capacity planning tools, again, are still available within S4HANA and GUI. The capacity evaluation, CM01 through CM05s, our capacity levelings, our CM21 through CM25s, are living and breathing very well within S4HANA GUI today. Just be cognizant of the fact that the graphical planning board will eventually be phased out, and whatever that new one is, it'll be a much simplified version. So just be cognizant of the amount of customization you do. Again, embedded PPDS, if you're using APO today, or if you want to go the route of advanced planning, it's much more simplified in S4HANA. It's replacing a lot of that functionality with an APO, and maybe also if you're going to migrate away, or if you're thinking of embedded PPDS, if you have a SNOP process that's matured, you're ready to take that leap, you might as well go ahead and start considering maybe IBP as well, to work in conjunction with embedded PPDS. And again, Fiori, as you just saw some of those key apps, it has an entire suite of optimized tiles and apps. that are aimed at providing a really unique user experience above and beyond just those cheat codes that we're using today. So it's a lot more analytics, a lot more real time, a lot more trying to be proactive with the health of our supply chain, as opposed to working, at least on the production side and the work centers, as opposed to working reactively to find those bottlenecks. Now we can see those bottlenecks in real time. We can see where we have issues across those operations and those work centers in real time, and start being proactive in terms of the material shortages and so forth, and really use this with our exception monitoring tools that we are hopefully have in place today or will be using very soon. Those two work very much hand in hand to ensure that we're proactively planning our supply chain, not reactively planning them. So I do believe with that, I am out of time. Kelly, is that, am I correct?
Yes, thank you, Sean. That was a lot of good information. Definitely a lot to take in there. So if anybody has any questions, let's please get those added to the chat or the question section on the side there. And then while we're doing that, I just want to personally invite you all to our upcoming Master Class SAP Supply Chain Bootcamp, which is November 2nd through the 4th. And this is through a mixture of lecture demos and some hands-on sessions. Our SAP experts will be sharing lots of tips, tricks, SAP best practices, and strategic recommendations that you can immediately put to use. So for more information, you can scan the QR code that we have on the screen there, or visit the URL, reveal value / events / masterclass SAP Supply Chain Bootcamp. So great opportunity if you want to take a look for some more information. And then Sean, if you can go ahead and get to that next screen. And we got a couple questions here from the audience that we're going to take. The first one is, we are using ECC T codes CM21 and CM29 to prepare production plan and scheduling. Are you saying with S4HANA, it will be replaced with detailed scheduling functionality of PPDS?
Fair. No, good point. No. If you're using CM21 or any of the other graphical planning transactions in ECC, again, those are still very much alive and living within S4HANA. You can choose, if you like, if you want to go to advanced planning and start working with heuristics and so forth, you can certainly choose to go that route, but you're not required to. So if you want to go the route of embedded PPDS and maybe have IBP on top of that, and you're to the point where you're maturing above and beyond what you get on the graphical planning board, then you can certainly take that leap, but you're not required to. You can use those same transactions within S4HANA GUI.
All right, thanks. Kind of a follow-up question to that is, they're also using MRP areas for production planning. How will that be supported in S4?
But not within the realm of APO, right? So just the MRP areas, it was MRP areas, right? Did I hear that correctly?
Yeah, that's all they had mentioned in the question here was with MRP.
Yeah, that all stays the same. There's no difference there. If you're using them today, they're still alive within S4HANA as well. So no difference there.
Thanks, Sean. And then this was, you were on slide 18, I think it was, capacity leveling they're referring to. Will it have any production plan performance KPI options, like percentages of production order completion versus planned, or number of scheduling changes within a short-term planning horizon?
That is a great question. Now you get into my favorite subject of analytics. So I do believe there are some apps that will cover that, but even in the GUI format, these transactions here are alive, breathing, and well. And these transactions are literally meant to do just that, right? So you can assess any period of time, the past month, the past year, from a material aspect, from a order aspect, or even from an operation and work center aspect. And there is this, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13 out of probably 20 or 30 different key characteristics or KPIs that you can actually pull in and assess against. So this is your target to actual. So for my production order dates versus my actual confirmations, did I start on time? Did I end on time? Are my lead times accurate? Am I going over my lead time? Am I over promising, under promising? All this stuff is available in ECC even today, and is available within S4HANA as well. So I'll have to dig into some of the apps. It's something that I have on my plate to dig into the apps that may cover some of this, but I know for a fact that in S4HANA GUI, those same transactions are exactly the same. The same key characteristics are exactly the same. So what you get in even in ECC today from that standpoint is available tomorrow in S4HANA GUI.
All right, thanks, Sean. We're going to take one more question here. I have a question asking, is the optimizer still available?
Yes. Well, let me take that back. So the optimizer is still available in APO. The optimizer is not necessarily, so the optimizer is essentially that PPDS side of the world, right? So it's going into that side, determining where the capacity restraints are. That tomorrow, I mean, you can still use APO even today. They're just migrating away from APO. So tomorrow, if you're using APO today, you may want to do a lot of research in what it may take to go from APO to embedded PPDS. So you can still use PPDS within APO. I don't think there's anything that's stopping you from doing that. But if you're looking to the future, you may want to strongly consider the embedded PPDS aspect, because it's going to be living, breathing, and coincide directly with MRP Live. So all those benefits that you get from MRP Live are now integrated into the embedded PPDS. So that optimizer side of the world is now fully essentially embedded into embedded PPDS. Sorry for the redundancy there.
All right, thanks, Sean. If you could forward up to the next webinar slide for me.
Yes, absolutely.
All right. Yes. So thank you everybody for joining us today. This webinar is going to be available later today on our website under Insights. And then you're also going to find our previously recorded webinars in case you missed any of our previous sessions from this series. And we also provide other educational content such as white papers, blogs, and some helpful publications as well. So our next webinar, please join us, is going to be what is the difference in S4HANA versus ECC procurement and performance monitoring, which is scheduled for October 19th, and that'll start at 11 o'clock as well, Central Standard Time. And then as we get closer, we'll send out a reminder of that date and time so everyone can get registered. So that's all for today. Thank you again for joining us, and have a great day.
Yeah, thanks everybody.
Sean.
Thank you, Kelly. Bye, y'all.